I'm Ashton Addison from Event Chain for Investmentpitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Mr. G. Edward Griffin, the author of Creature from Jekyll Island and the Red Pill University. Mr. G, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Ashton. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited for our discussion today, and I want to dive right into it. I know you've been following the Federal Reserve for decades and decades, and 2020 seems like a major year for the Fed as they doubled their balance sheet, printed trillions, lots of stimulus to help out with the lockdowns and the pandemic. But at the same time, this also destroyed a lot of small businesses, and it seems to be widening the gap for the middle class and really not helping the everyday people. I'd love to start out by just hearing your thoughts on the recap and the damage report of this historic year of 2020.
Okay, now I promised to keep this short, so this is going to be hard because there's so much involved in your question. I would start off by saying, yeah, it does look like, especially in 2020 and now already in 2021, that what's going on at the Fed is not helping the little people at all. But I would comment by saying it never has. It's just more obvious now because we've always been able to take the bumps. Okay, well, gee, that wasn't a very smart thing to do that those banks did. I mean, they raised the interest rates once when we needed interest rates low, or they lowered it when, my God, we've already got too much inflation. And what's going on here? So it's never been in the interest of the little person. But my observation of what's going on today is rather discouraging, or I almost wish you hadn't asked me, because now I'm obligated to answer and to tell you exactly what I think. I believe that the banking fraternity, we know that have studied it, that the Federal Reserve is not a government agency, it's banks. It's a cartel of banks. And that's a very important thing for people to know, to understand what I'm about to say. This is not a government agency. It is not subject to, even though it appears to be subject to government control, it's more the other way around. Since these banks have the legal power to create money, they literally create the money, and they pass their own rules about how they create it and how much and what interest rates. I mean, it's a complete monopoly over the American money supply. And since they can do that, of course, they're running the show, not the government. They tell the Congress what to do, and it's all a charade when these Federal Reserve chairmen go before the congressional committees, and there's the committee sitting up on the dais. They're about 2 or 3 feet higher than everybody, and they're looking down, and there's the Federal Reserve chairman sitting at a bare table. He's answering questions like he's their servant, as he should be. But it's a laugh because I know, and they all know too, that the Federal Reserve is only there because he thinks it's good publicity to be there, because he thinks it looks good to make it appear that the banks are controlled by the government. In fact, since the banks create the money and fund the government, because the government doesn't get their money anymore from taxes. I mean, they still get quite a bit, but most of it comes from the Federal Reserve, and they just create this money. That's why they're just going crazy now with trillions and trillions of dollars. Where does that money come from? Well, they just create it, and so nobody worries about how much something costs. So, oh, you want to do this? How much does it cost? So don't bore me with that. Let's go for it, you know. So since that's the arrangement, it's actually the banks that are controlling the government. Now that's a very harsh statement, and but I think anybody that takes the time and really looks at what's going on behind the curtain, it's exactly true. So now, with that as context, what's going on? Well, the banks have decided, not the governments, but the banks have decided, I think, especially with this great reset looming, is to change the game completely. We're rapidly plunging now toward a new system, literally. It's not new, it's kind of old. It goes back to caveman days, where the guy with the biggest club and the most power, or the biggest tribe, he was the absolute ruler and master of his universe. That's about as far back as you can go. And that's where we're headed again, and they call it step forward, but I think it's a huge fall backwards. We're going back to a time when the world, they expect to be completely subservient to the will of a relatively small group, the dominant class, be way less than 1% of the population, will be telling everybody else what to do. And one of the primary methods of doing that is with purchasing power. You know, if you control a person's purchasing power, make it very difficult, if not impossible, to even buy food, or to pay rent, or to buy anything, to buy clothing, food, shelter. You can't go anywhere. You can't own a car. You can't buy a car. If they can control a person's economic existence totally, which was the goal of Marxism, we've gone far beyond Marxism now. They've gone into a technocracy where this is not done so much by theory anymore or economic policy as it used to be. It's being done now by technocracy. You just throw a switch and everybody's credit card goes off or whatever. So when you get to that point, it's possible really for a very small group of people to control the rest of the world. This is where I think they have decided, I should say, that they're going to plunge for this very fast. And in this scenario, Ashton, money and interest rates and all that, it doesn't mean anything. It's a new system or an old system again, as I say. It's just pure raw power. I believe there will be no such thing as money in a very short period of time. Money as we've known it, we've always known it in terms of, currencies. Each nation has its currency. We have the dollar, and the Japanese have the yen. The Chinese have the yen, and the Deutschmark in Germany and so forth. And now they've been going, of course, for a long time toward an international currency, which probably was going to be and may still be called the Bancor. The Bancor is the name they chose a long time ago. But I think their sights now are even beyond that. I think they're going to the point where money, as we have known it, will be completely replaced by digital units. Now we're talking about your topic, and you probably know more about this than I do. But as an observer, trying to pick up as much as I can, it seems to me that the digital system of payments has as many things. It's a powerful weapon, either can be used for good or evil. And of course, most of the eager people like us who are looking for some way to escape the banking monopoly say, oh, good, we've got cryptocurrency. We're outside of the banking system. Not necessarily. Because, as you know, all of the banks for at least a decade now have been spending millions, tens of millions of dollars trying to rush into the parade, so they'll be at the head of the parade, and that they'll be able to control the cryptocurrency, even though there's a wide held belief that you can't control cryptocurrency. Well, you can, and if you have enough money, and if you control the governments to pass laws to make certain things illegal, and if you control the technocracy also and funnel everything through a side chain or some kind of a clearinghouse, there'll be aspects of the crypto chain that will be beyond the control of anybody. But when they all merge together through some kind of a funnel or a clearinghouse so that you can buy coffee, gasoline, and everything else, all of a sudden there's a choke point. And wherever there's a choke point, somebody's going to grab hold of it and choke it. So that's my view. I think what we're heading toward to now, this is the overview, is a new system indeed. Like Klaus calls it the Great Reset, and it's going back to a primitive state where money will not really play so much a role as much as crypto units, whatever they want to call them. They'll give them different names, but there will be units, and they will be issued or allowed to be held on the basis of your political obedience. And it's a new system. It's already largely in place in Japan right now. Excuse me, that's twice I've done that today. I really meant to say China. So they have the social credit system. That's where we're going. And so control over your spending power is more important than what you call those units of spending power. I think that's what's underway right now, and we've got to stop it, because if we cross over that line, and all of a sudden, no matter how much money we think we had, all of a sudden it can be turned off with a switch, or it can be confiscated or held, our banking account can be closed down. And so there's some refuge in cryptocurrencies, but there's the danger there that they can put a switch on that too, or just turn off the whole bloody internet. People say, well, that's impossible. They need the internet. Well, there are different levels of the internet that can be turned off. Our levels could be turned off, and theirs could remain on. Or things like that could actually happen. And of course, gold and silver and other hard assets are always a hedge against that kind of thing. But now we come to the totalitarian state, which says it's illegal for you to own gold or silver. And they'll have agents out there sniffing out the people that want to buy things with gold or silver, and they'll wind up in the gulag, So that's my rather pessimistic, dark view of it. And I'm really not so pessimistic as it may sound, because I think this, in a way, is a good thing, and I'll explain that quickly. It's a good thing because it's happening rapidly, and it's easier to see when it's rapid. If they had continued on that slow, inch by inch, year by year incrementation that they were on, I don't think any of us would hardly notice or care. Oh, well, that's a little bit more, the old idea of the frog in the boiling pot. But all of a sudden they turned up the heat now, and everybody can see it. And I think there are a lot of us frogs that are getting ready to jump out. And so that's what I mean by a good thing.
Yeah, thank you for all those thoughts, Mr. G. And yeah, it seems like this has been a really long-term plan, but accelerated in the recent times here. And you mentioned the technocracy a few times, and I just want to ask you a little bit about that. It seems that over the past years here, the FANG stocks and the social media platforms, Google, Facebook, Amazon, seem to have a portal for everybody in the world now that, since the lockdown, that we need to communicate through these platforms. And it seems, as you mentioned, in China, that there's this surveillance state in 1984, where that's sort of becoming the norm, and everybody in the whole world is using these platforms, and they have the control of what you can see or what you can't see, and what is right and what is wrong. Do you see, as this continues, a merger of the banking system and the technocracy, or how do you see that playing out, and is there anything that the regular people can do about it?
Two different questions there. First of all, they're already merged. I guess a lot of people like to call it the deep state, which is not a bad name for it. I rather like the name that was given to it by a fellow by the name of Joe Plummer. He's written some good books on these various topics, and Joe calls it the dominant class. And it is. It's not an organization. It's not a single organization. There are a lot of organizations within this group, and there is a hierarchy, and there's no question that there are people pretty much at the top of this conglomerate that, if not absolutely control it, very strongly influence it, because they're the ones with their hands on the money supply, and everybody listens when they speak, and we're talking about the heads of the banking institutions primarily, but there's an occult level that's in there too. It gets very murky. It's not pleasant research, and so yeah, they're already merged. I mean, it's already done. It was done a long time ago. It's just like the rain finally came and the sun came out and the mushrooms all came up at once. We said, where did these mushrooms come from? Well, they've been there for a long time, waiting for the rain, and so the rain has come and the mushrooms have sprouted, and we say, oh my gosh, these characters are everywhere. And they've been quietly maneuvering to control the communication system, the banking system, the educational system, the court system, all of these things. And they've done this very methodically, and it's been over a long period of time. So yeah, it's merged already. And so your question was two parts, and what can we do about it? Yes. Well, it kind of reminds me of the old saying, what can the average person do? And my kind of quirky answer is, or quarky, I guess is the way they call it, not quarky, or snarky answer is, well, the average person can't do anything. Forget it. The average person is not interested until he's got a lot of pain. The average person doesn't want to get informed. The average person doesn't want to hear about it. He doesn't believe it. He falls for every trick that comes down the pike. He's interested in just making money and having a good time. He doesn't want to take responsibility for it. That's what the average person. So if you're an average person, forget it. So the way to do anything about it is to stop being average. Now, as they say, that's a little snarky, but it makes a point, and it's true. There's a lot of truth in that. The world is always determined by usually 1% of the population or less, and they're not the average. The history is always shaped by people who are just not average at all. They've taken responsibility. They get organized. I mean, our dominant class is led by far less than 1% of the population. And they're not average. And they're not average just because they have a lot of money and a lot of power. They have a lot of money and a lot of power because they had a plan from the very beginning to acquire money and power. And they pursued it relentlessly from one generation to the next. So it's not just one or two people. If you think, we'll just vote this guy out of office and get somebody else in, you've missed the point. All you've done, if you've voted somebody out, is you've created a vacancy. Now, who's going to step into the vacancy? As long as that system exists, that's the predator or the dominant class that's going to move into those positions of money and power. So what can the unaverage person do? Well, they can really get up to speed as to what's going on. It doesn't take much time. I would encourage people to come to our relatively new website, which is focused on that stage of the preparation to doing something about it, and that's called redpilluniversity.org. It's all free. Everything is there at no charge. And believe me, we're loading stuff in there every day now, and it's well on the road, if it's not already being there, as the most comprehensive and complete repository of information of this kind in the world. So that's a good place to start, but don't stay there, because you'll come to a point where you'll say, gosh, okay, I get it. We got to do something about it. Now what? So then the next phase is to become involved at the local level with people of like mind. This is what our dominant class has done. If you look in your local community, everywhere you look, you see little groups that are funded by somebody like Soros or somebody we don't even know, the deep state. They're all part of the dominant class. They all have the same goal in mind. So we have to build the same organizations. Now, we don't have the money, but fortunately we have the bodies. We have the army. People are just clamoring, what can we do? What can we do? And they're not the average, by the way. When they start asking that question, what can we do? Suddenly they're not average anymore, because the average person says, don't bother me. Don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear about it. So we have millions and millions of people are just waiting to do something if they just knew what to do. So it's our job to try and bring those people together. And I think it wouldn't be long, if I see the movement already, to the point where we have critical mass. And then I don't care how much money they have. I don't care how much influence they have. I don't care how powerful the engines of coercion are. If you awaken the sleeping giant, then freedom will prevail. It will be returned. But that doesn't mean it'll be returned without a lot of payment. I mean, we've gone a long way, and I think it's much like being a drug addict. I mean, you can get off of it, but it's going to be painful. There's going to be a period of time when life is very unpleasant. We can't avoid that. I mean, we've gone too far. But the encouraging thing is we will come out the other side. And once we come out the other side, we will have learned, the whole world will have learned an important lesson about collectivism. And if we do our part, then the world will never go back to collectivism again.
Very well said, Mr. G. And we are running out of time, but I do want to ask you one last question. And you were just talking about, awakening the sleeping giant, and when the army realizes that they're stronger together. And it seems that there's been a stepping stone in terms of this starting with the recent events in the market with GameStop and AMC and retail investors in the Wall Street Bets army, so to say, buying these stocks to short squeeze hedge funds. And now people start getting interested in short squeezing silver and other stocks and trying to band together as retail investors to put their foot down and say, hey, the hedge funds are controlling things, and when it's us doing it, then it's wrong, but when it's them doing it, it's right. And so I'm curious, do you think that this is a good step in the right direction towards awakening that sleeping giant?
I think it's a good step, but it's a very small step, and I'll tell you the reason that I'm cautious about my answer is because I note that this is very much like the tax revolt movement. I mean, there are people who said these taxes are too high, and they're resisting. Some of them are challenging the whole tax concept in courts and so forth. Is that a good sign? Well, I think it is, because people are realizing that they're being taken advantage of, they're being plundered and so forth. But the reason I have caution on it is I noticed that in both the tax revolt movement and now in the in the short squeeze and all of that, these people are motivated not by a desire to be free, but to make money or to save money. It's all about money. I unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but I've noted that so many of my friends who are in the tax revolt movement have no interest in other aspects of the liberty movement. It's only when it affects their pocketbook. Now that's very discouraging to me. So it's a good step, all right, but I'm cautious because we've got to take much bigger steps than that. But we have people who are interested just because it's the right thing to do, not because it affects them in their pocketbook.
Yeah.
Freedom cannot be weighed on the scale of money. So I think it's a good start, but let's keep going. Let's let these people realize that if we don't win this battle, all the money in the world is not going to save them. they'll be lined up against the wall because there'll be those dirty capitalists who brought all this about by hoarding this and not going along and so forth. They caused this terrible thing to happen. To the wall with them. And the masses will say, yes, to the wall. It's almost like a horrible movie. I can see it right now in my mind. So money isn't everything. It's a good step, but let's go on and think about liberty.
Great. Thank you so much for all of your insights, Mr. G. I will leave the link to Red Pill University in the description box below. I really appreciate you coming on and speaking, and it seems now is the time to take action, and there's a lot of things happening. So all
yes,
the best.
Ashton, thank you for that. And let me just close, if I may. I forgot to plug our upcoming event, if I may do that.
Yeah.
We have a series of Red Pill Expos, and they've been wildly successful. Our last one was on Jekyll Island. Back in October. Jekyll Island, of course, is the scene of the crime. For those of you who know about the Federal Reserve, it was crafted and conceived at a secret meeting on Jekyll Island, Georgia, back in 1910. So we had our last event there. It was a smashing success, and we've also got the next one just announced now, and we're about to announce it. This is before the official announcement, but it's scheduled for Rapid City, South Dakota. Rapid City, South, why there? Well, South Dakota, first of all, is one of the few sane states. I mean, everybody's not all locked down with these masks and 6 feet and locked in their houses and everything. And they got signs up and everything, beware, beware, but but mostly people just ignore these things. So we thought, well, let's go there where there's a little bit of fresh, free air to breathe. And also it's about a 30-minute drive from Mount Rushmore. Go look at a national monument like that. So our next one is on June 4th, 5th, and 6th in Rapid City, South Dakota. So if you want to know more about that, go to redpillexpo.org, redpillexpo.org. So there's my plug, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Mr. G.
Thank you. Bye-bye.